You're live, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Krista. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you here. And as I said to you earlier, Happy New Year. I'd like to call our meeting to order now, and we'll begin with the words that we often begin with. I'd like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We recognize the peace and friendship treaties signed between the British Crown and the Mi'kmaq. We're all treaty people, and we have rights and responsibilities as Mi'kmaq and settlers alike. So I'm just making sure everybody, I can see people, microphones are working. I think we're all good, and we're going to be joined by Councillor Stoddard momentarily, I believe, when her technical issues are resolved. I'd also like to just at this point welcome Krista to us, to work with us as our Krista Vining, who is our legislative assistant. I hope I've got that right, Krista. I just know her as Krista. She started us off with the Women's Advisory Committee, and she's stepped up to give us a hand now, and really appreciate you doing that, and really appreciate you being here with us today, Krista. So the first item of business is the approval of the minutes. The minutes have been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions that people, any changes that people would like to make, or are you ready to make a motion to accept them as circulated?
I'll move that we accept the minutes of December 2nd, 2021 as circulated.
I'll second.
Seconded by Tanya. Ready for the question? All those in favor indicate by, I think I'll get you to wave. Just give me a wave if you're in favor.
Aye.
Thanks. Say aye and wave your hand, whatever works. You've got the order of business that's been presented. Are there any additions or deletions to the order of business? There being none, then I would ask again for a motion to approve the agenda as it's been presented.
I'll motion to approve the agenda as circulated.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. And a seconder for that motion?
I can second it.
Okay, I heard Joanne first. So moved by Tanya and seconded by Joanne. Ready for the question? All those in favor indicate by waving and saying aye. We're good. There's only 5 members here at the moment, so you got to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to making motions. So expect to make some more. There is no business arising out of the minutes, as far as I know. And at this point, then I'll call for any declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that anybody would like to mention? No. All right. And there are no motions of rescission. So the item that we need to address is, first item is number 7, which is consideration of deferred business. And as you know, there was a request that maybe we move our meeting date to a different day of the week than Thursday. And so that was considered. And Haruka sent out a poll, and the consensus was that the meeting day should stay on Thursday. And so now we have the meeting schedule as perhaps, Krista, can you post that so people can see it? It's on.
Just one moment.
Okay. That's okay. While you're doing that, I'll just draw members' attention to the fact that so the meetings are scheduled for Thursday, the first Thursday of the month, with the exception of September, I believe. September, it'll be the second Thursday of the month. There we go. Yeah, if you can just scroll up. Thank you, Krista. So September would be the second Thursday of the month, just to move it a little bit away from the September long weekend. There's no meeting scheduled for August, and there's, if required, we would meet on July the 7th. It's possible that we will not meet in July or August. Our administrative order says that we are required to have 6 meetings a year. Last year we had, we met every month except for August. I think that's pretty straightforward with regard to meeting dates and days. So I would entertain a motion to approve that proposed meeting schedule as it's been circulated in the staff memorandum.
A motion to approve the schedule as circulated.
Okay, Tanya moves that. I'm looking for a seconder.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Blackburn. Are there any questions or concerns about that? We're good to go then. Ready for the question? All those in favor indicate by waving a hand or saying aye or both. Okay, motion is carried. So that brings us to item number 8, and we have with us Emma Norton. And Emma is going to, hello Emma, nice to see you. Emma and I have had phone conversations and not a virtual visual conversation. Emma, I didn't jot down your title. Emma has a long title with the Climate Emergency Unit. Is that right? Am I got the right unit? So I'll let you just talk a little bit about that. Emma, our time is good, so we would like to welcome you to present for, I don't know, 15-20 minutes, however long it takes. And then members will have an opportunity, we'll go around the table, well, around the screen, I guess, and give members an opportunity to make comments or ask questions or both. Okay, are we good?
We're good.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you're all feeling safe and healthy. Thanks so much for inviting me to present today. I am a director with the Climate Emergency Unit. I focus on government relations and Atlantic Canada organizing. And like the chair said, my name is Emma Norton. I live in District 5, so Councillor Sam Austin's district, so he hears a lot from me about climate change. The desired outcome of my presentation to you today is that you will make a motion or a recommendation, I'm still not entirely sure what your process is, to fully fund and implement Halifax, Halifax's climate action plan. And provide all of council and make a recommendation that council has a lens against which to measure whether the policies they are passing measure up to the climate emergency declaration they passed in 2019. And I would also ask that you pay particular attention to creating the capacity within Halifax's government to implement the climate plan. And that includes mainstreaming climate into municipal operations and governance and capacity for action. Recently, just in December, Shannon, who directs the climate team within Halifax, did a report about the climate plan, and all of these items are highlighted in the plan as something that, as parts of the plan that are under-resourced and not on track to succeed. So as I mentioned, I work with the Climate Emergency Unit. We are a 5-year project of the David Suzuki Institute, not the foundation. So because we're not with the foundation, we're non-charitable, we can be more nimble, more strategically political when need be. And this project was sparked by Seth Klein's book called A Good War, which compares the mobilization of Canada during the Second World War to the mobilization that's required for the climate crisis. And my team's job is to push all levels of government into climate emergency mode. We are militantly optimistic, yet we tell the truth about the gravity of the crisis we are in. And we are here to help create the political will for elected officials like those that you're advocating to, like some of you on the call, and the leaders in our society to become the leaders we need them to be right now at this time of climate crisis. And I believe that we can all confidently say that we are in a climate emergency. Council declared a climate emergency at the beginning of 2019. However, the council is not acting like we are in a climate emergency. And I want to stress that this is not just an ecological crisis. Climate change is just as equally a human and social justice crisis and a civilization threat. And it's imperative that we start to recognize it as such. But due to inaction, we have locked ourselves into a different world than the one that you and I have come to know. And we can still prevent this world from becoming uninhabitable. Can you put a new slide up, please, Krista? Thank you. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the scientific notion of a carbon budget. Essentially, it's this idea that there is only a certain amount of carbon that humanity can emit or use before catastrophic global heating is unavoidable. It's a very scary, but a very real concept. We do know that our global carbon budget gives us between 6 and 9 years at business as usual until we exceed 1.5 degrees. And 1.5 degrees warming is the point at which many developing communities are destroyed, or vulnerable communities would be destroyed, and millions of people are displaced or die. And we have about 16 years until the worst of climate change is completely unavoidable for the entire globe. The global carbon budget can be parsed out by jurisdiction so that every town, province, and country can better understand their own carbon budget. And Shannon Medema, the director of Halifax's climate department that I mentioned earlier, presented Halifax's carbon budget at the last December meeting on December 13th. I have my presentation up on beside me, that's why I'm going to look over occasionally. And in this graphic, which I'm showing to you now, it shows the carbon budget that Halifax has based on the global carbon budget. And based on Halifax's current emissions, if we don't reduce our emissions drastically, we will have exceeded our carbon budget by the last square that you see here. So every square represents a week. The first square is when the council declared a climate emergency in 2019. There you see the Halifax or the Halifax Climate Plan was approved. The third blue is not this week. That was the week that Shannon presented it. And the carbon budget exceeded would be in 2027 or 2028. I didn't do the exact calculations, but that's very soon. That's sooner than 2030, which is the goal that a lot of people think about. And I think this is very telling, and I don't think it got a lot of media attention, despite the very important message that it conveys. All right, so the Climate Emergency Unit, in order to enable us to better tackle the crisis at hand, has developed a framework for leaders like yourselves, like the councillors, and all institutions to better understand what emergency mode looks like. And this framework stands on 4 markers that were reflected during the Second World War, and 2 more that are necessary in today's society. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So number 1 is spend what it takes to win. When C.D. Howe, the minister who oversaw Canada's wartime military production, was pressed about government spending, he famously replied, "If we lose the war, nothing will matter. And we can say the same today. If we don't beat global warming, if we don't beat climate change, nothing will matter. Some ways you can make sure that that your government is spending what it takes to win is to create a carbon budget like the one we just saw, is to add a climate no-go or go lens to every budget decision, make sure that municipal funds and staff pensions and endowments continue to invest in fossil fuels are divested from them because they're at risk if they're invested. Reallocating funds from greenhouse gas intensive projects to emission reduction projects, and thinking beyond the cost per ton. We can no longer just invest in climate projects with good payback, like energy efficiency, changing of light bulbs. We need to think about really strong measures to get us to those significant energy reduction targets that are needed. Next slide, please. Thank you. So during the Second World War, starting from a base of virtually nothing, the Canadian economy and its labor force pumped out a volume of military equipment that is simply mind-blowing. And they did this by creating new institutions, which were crown corporations. The Canadian government established 28 crown corporations, in fact, to meet the supply and munitions requirements of the war. So in Halifax, we actually have a quite good example of what a new institution might look like. It could be more formalized, but there is a team called the R3 team, which I sit on. It's called the Retrofits Resilience. Oh, I can't remember the last three, the last R, but we're all about retrofits and improving the resilience of homes in Halifax. But even that committee isn't really in emergency mode, which is pretty rich for me to say, given that I sit on it. And this is where I would reiterate that according to the Halifax report, or the Halifax Climate Plan report, only 14% of the actions are adequately resourced and 20% are on track. So that's not a very good track record right now. So Halifax needs to implement the actions related to governance structure and mainstream climate into all municipal operations. Next slide, please. So we have to move from incentive and voluntary policies to mandatory policies, because right now we encourage change, we incentivize change, we offer rebates, we send price signals, but what we have decidedly not done is require change. So this is true for almost all municipal climate policies. We're trying to, the council, the government is trying to incentivize its way to victory, but it won't work. We need to put into place policies that have clear near-term dates and significant requirements, like no new on-site fossil fuels in new construction. We need to have retrofits and new builds. We have to say no to sprawl and highway expansion so that we don't lock ourselves into development paths that take us into the opposite direction of where we urgently need to go. Another very clear one is the municipality should no longer be purchasing internal combustion engine vehicles. It's 2022. The science is clear. The International Energy Agency has been clear. The International Panel on Climate Change has been clear. We have no more time for fossil fuel infrastructure, whether it's tiny infrastructure like cars or larger scale infrastructure like natural gas plants. Next slide, please. Thank you. So finally, we need to tell the truth about the severity of the crisis and the measures necessary to combat it. It took leadership to mobilize the public during the Second World War in frequency and in tone, in words and in action. Emergencies need to look and sound and feel like emergencies. We know what that feels like right now because we're living through a healthcare emergency with the pandemic. And every day, just about, we get an update from our political leaders. We hear about it in the media. We know the new numbers. But we don't have that kind of communication about climate at all, even though we've declared it an emergency. We don't know about the daily greenhouse gas emissions in Halifax or Nova Scotia or even Canada. We have not put the resources towards collecting it. Only 4 out of 5 Haligonians even know that we have a Halifax climate plan, which is going to make it very hard for the Halifax government to pass any kind of strong climate legislation where we actually need to spend what it takes. And honestly, there's just not a good emergency mode at any level of government until you have a good communications plan. And I don't see that communications plan reflected in the Halifax climate report or in the Halifax plan at all. And we just won't get the public on side with our need to act unless we're clear that we're doing this, that we're taking action for good reason, and everyone's lives are going to be better after. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, those 4 markers were reflected during the Second World War and to some point, in some part, in Canada's pandemic response, but they're not necessarily there. But there are more that are necessary to a successful climate change mobilization. So next slide, please. So marker number 5 is that we need to leave no one behind. Housing people, making sure that green technology is affordable, those are all essential to the transition. To quote my colleague Seth, we cannot ask people to separate their fears about the climate crisis from the other affordable anxieties, economic pressures, and systemic crises they face. At a very basic level, inequality undermines trust that we are all in this together. Many doubt the task at hand will be undertaken in a fair way. It is hard to rally the public if many believe the rich are merely buying their way out of making change, fortifying their homes, walling off their communities, or purchasing carbon offsets in the hopes that others will lower their actual emissions. Equally troubling is the cultural narrative that casts climate action as part of an elite project that sees the poor or those currently working in the fossil fuel sector as expendable. So when we talk about leaving no one behind, that means that we need to invest in social cohesion and taking care of each other. We need to invest in a just transition for fossil fuel workers. We need to make sure that the communities, predominantly communities of color, communities that live with more of a low income, people with disabilities, those are the people that are already suffering, especially, and in, this is, it was just seen in an all too real way in BC last year when 600 people died because of the climate crisis. And almost all of those people were seniors or low income people. And if we had taken action and made sure that everyone had a heat pump instead of natural gas heating, then they would have had a cooling system and maybe they'd be here today. And this isn't about a political agenda. It's actually just about saving people's lives, and climate action could have meant that they were here with us. Next slide, please. So, and also marker number 6, respect Indigenous leadership, rights, and treaties. The path forward has to be one of true cooperation and partnership, and one that honors and respects Indigenous title and rights. We have to listen to Indigenous communities about the climate crisis and respect, and we need to right the injustices of the past and fundamentally break the colonial practices that have marked our politics and economic development for the future. And, as our mainstream politics dither and dodge meaningful climate action over and over again, it's the assertion of Indigenous title and rights that's buying us time, slowing and blocking new fossil fuel projects until our larger politics come into compliance with the climate science. Most recently, we heard about this happening with the Alton Gas project. Water protectors were able to prevent a large fossil fuel storage project from being built in Nova Scotia when the science is clearly saying we should not be building fossil fuel infrastructure anymore. And a new report from the Indigenous Environment Network and Oil Change International found that Indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas pollution equivalent to at least 1/4 of annual US and Canadian emissions. So those are the 6 markers of a government and climate crisis. And I want to bring it, that's the message of the Climate Emergency Unit. And I want to bring it to the question that was asked of me in response to how does climate impact women? So much of any of you have heard of Project Drawdown, but that's a large research project with a large group of academics and scientists. And their number one recommendation was to invest in, the project was to help document all of the best solutions for climate that we have at our fingertips. And the number one recommendation they had was to increase women's education and empower women. So I think that really hits home the point that women are greatly impacted by the crisis, but also we have a significant role to play in the solutions. I did watch Noreen Mabiza's presentation before putting this together, and I think that she did a wonderful breakdown of how climate impacts women, especially how the caring professions that are predominantly made up of women in employment are mostly populated by women, and these are the professions that will be under increased demand under any crisis, including the climate crisis. And you'll see on my slide here, it says All We Can Save. If you haven't read it yet, that's an anthology of essays. I think I'm using anthology, right? Maybe it's a collection of essays that was curated by Ayana Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson. They're all written by women, predominantly climate change experts, water protectors, land defenders, activists, and it's full of solutions and hope when we're all feeling a little bit like, are we running out of time? And I highly recommend it. And I really appreciate following Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson's media. And Catherine K. Wilkinson is quoted as saying, if you're going to be a feminist on a hot planet, you have to be a climate feminist. Like, feminism includes climate activism as much as climate activism also includes feminism. And this is another quote of Catherine K. Wilkinson's that I really like. We find ourselves confronting a system that has been very focused on hierarchy, control, exploitation, and frankly, decision-making that is largely sat with a relatively narrow set of folks. And certainly women have not been at the table anywhere near equally in shaping the status quo that we find ourselves in. The same is true for people of color, especially women of color, and the same is true for Indigenous peoples and especially Indigenous women. And there's lots of statistics out there too about how men have larger carbon footprints than women. The top 1% of income earners globally are responsible for more carbon emissions than the bottom 50% of earners, and all that top 1%, almost all of them are men. And it's typically women and girls that bear the burden in the wake of more frequent climate disasters, whether it's here or largely abroad. And about 80% of the people displaced by climate change are women. And they are also more likely, because of this displacement, to experience homelessness, poverty, sexual violence, and disease. I also, actually in the book that I recommended to you, there's a local example from Halifax, because the woman who wrote the essay had been invited by Adsum House to come to Halifax and talk about how climate change is tied to their work. And they were saying how Adsum House was telling a story about how they were noticing that the more extreme weather events were meaning that the women that they worked with and their children were less able to make appointments because they relied so much on our public transit system. It was harder to get around, and it was impacting people in their day-to-day lives, that the climate is changing and extreme weather is getting worse. So I guess, I actually have a lot of notes on this, and I'm trying to parse it down so I can actually have a conversation with you. But on a really personal level, I think it is for me, I think about, I'm 31, I want to have kids. The carbon budget will be out by the time I'm 40. So basically the time in which I have to decide whether or not to have children is a time in which it's most important that we act on climate change. And this goes for all childbearing people, like women or trans, but like this is a tough decision for anyone to make right now. And I'm having this discussion with a lot of my friends about whether or not to have kids. And it's not because of the impact that the kids will have on the world. It's because we're afraid of the world that we're bringing them into. So there's a lot of climate anxiety. And I think that probably Lily can tell us a lot about this because of what Lily's studying. But finally, I'm just going to end with like a suggestion at what you might do with your position as the advisory council. It's the next slide. It's the simplest slide of them all. Oh, is it not there? There we go. Oh. This is it, just black and white. I'm not sure if you can make a motion like this, but would love to see you support the council in fully funding and implementing the Halifax Climate Plan, AKA spending what it takes. The budget is coming up in March. They need as much support as they can get to put some major spending into climate action. So that's it. I really appreciate the time to chat with you today about something I'm so passionate about.
Wow, thank you, Emma. That was very, very helpful, inspiring in some ways, not almost frightening in other, but thank you very much. And I'm sure our members will have some comments or questions for you. So what we typically do is we go alphabetically by last name. So that brings us first to Lily. Lily, are you, would you like to make some comments or ask questions?
Yeah, for sure. I don't have any questions, but I'm really glad, Emma, that you were able to come give this presentation today. And I hope that we can take your suggestion in terms of the motion. I think it will have to be slightly different, but that's something before you came and presented to us, actually, that I've been talking with our chair about how we could support the council to make sure that Halifax gets implemented. So I really want to see how we can move forward and advocate for that in our position. So yeah, thank you. That was a very thorough presentation, and I think it gives us a lot to work with. And I'm interested to see what other folks think and if they have any questions as well.
Okay, Joanne, what would you like to contribute here?
Emma, thank you so much. That was like, I know you have so much more, but that was that felt like a really complete, compact presentation. I might have more questions later, but right now, do you know when Halifax actually declared that we were in fact in a climate emergency, did they at that time attach any money to it, or was it just a declaration? Oh, and I'm sure Lisa can respond to it.
I'll let Lisa.
Yeah, if I could, Madam Chair. So yes, when former Councillor Zarowski brought the declaration of a climate emergency to the table, we were in the process of developing the Halifax, which is our climate mitigation plan. So at that time, we didn't attach any funding to it, pending the return of the Halifax plan. I can report that actually council just got a sort of a printed update on where we are with the Halifax recommendations and implementing them. And we have a separate committee of the whole meeting scheduled for January the 21st. And that's going to be the total crux of the conversation, is going through the Halifax plan, looking at the update and sort of coming to grips with, okay, this is, these are the projects that are in flight. This is what still needs to be done. This is what it's going to cost. How are we going to get, and where are we going to get this money? So those conversations are taking place at the council level, and will be taking place big time come January 21st. Thank you.
And just a follow up to that, is the Halifax plan available for publicly for us to look at?
Most definitely. I will go online right now and put a link and put it in the chat for you.
Just further to that, Joanne, if I may, I've been thinking that it would be helpful for us to actually have, is it Shannon, the director of Halifax Plan 2050, come to the next meeting to give us kind of, it's always good for us to read the reports, of course, but it's helpful to have someone speak to it. And so that is in the works, that we might ask her to come and speak to that plan, so we can get a little bit more detail about it. But yes, I've seen it online. It's not hard to access. Thank you, Lisa.
Emma, I just wanted to understand the climate emergency unit. I understand you're working on a project in the David Suzuki organization, and is the unit though that you refer to a part of the Halifax Council or under the Halifax Council, or is it totally outside of that?
You mean like the Halifax group of stakeholders that contribute to the climate plan?
No, your title itself, and that you said you were part of the climate emergency unit.
Oh no, we are a national organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, misunderstood.
No, that's fine. There's so much, but I'll pass it on to somebody else right now. Thank you so much.
Councillor Blackburn, your turn.
There we go. Sorry about that. I'm good at this time. That was the only thing that I was going to discuss, was the upcoming meeting on the 21st. So I'm good. Thank you.
And Tanya.
Thank you so much for presenting to us, Emma. And I have no questions at this time.
All right. And I guess that brings us to Councillor Stoddard. Councillor Stoddard, glad to see you. You're having a little difficulty connecting up with us, so we're happy you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I missed some of your presentation, Emma. So I really can't comment at this time, but what I did see was was remarkable, actually, the amount of work you put into it. And I look forward to having a meeting with the council. Thank you.
And Christine, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Emma, for your presentation. That was great. And I don't have a question, but I want to highlight the 2 points you mentioned about women and climate change. Like, one is the importance of education, the awareness, like women can learn more about climate change. Another one is about the decision making, like women need to be on the table to making this type of decision in regards of climate change. I find these 2 points are very, very important. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any other comments or questions come to mind after hearing each other? Joanne.
Just a quick question. Do we know at this point what it would take to fully fund the plan, or I imagine that would come out of the 21st meeting?
I'm sure Councillor Blackburn or Councillor Stoddard could speak to this as well, but we do know, like, the report that Shannon Medema gave to the Environment Sustainability Standing Committee had a 3-year budget in it. And we don't know what it would take to fully fund Halifax, and I've had many conversations where councillors have been asking for that. But the thing is, everything is developing so quickly. It's kind of a useless project to ask that team to price it all out beyond the 3 years, because the prices are changing, the situation is changing, especially on the adaptation side, which is also in the Halifax Climate Plan. We just don't know what's coming down the pipe. Like, we don't know when another Hurricane Juan might show up, or when we might all lose power again for days, or something might wash out. And I think I was talking about this today with a group of climate advocates from Halifax as we're discussing what to do about the upcoming budget decisions, and just saying, like, even what's in the report, we feel like, you know, if Halifax decided to take the four pillars, the 6 pillars seriously, you know, if we made things mandatory, if we made sure that no one was getting left behind, that would mean a lot more spending. Like, imagine that we decided that everyone needed to switch from oil heating to electric heat. So all those homes, they get a deep energy retrofit. What are you going to do for their oil-based furnace, which they're currently paying a lease for? You would need to pay out the lease for them. So like, if we actually get into true emergency mode, there's going to have to be a lot of creative financing, and I'm sure even more spending than what's already been indicated in the plan. And I would also say about the plan, sorry, I'm almost done, is that it doesn't include comms. Like, there's nothing in the Halifax plan that included communications. And it's wild how many people don't know about it. And when people don't know about it, they don't know about the benefits that we're going to get from it. Like, every home in Halifax is supposed to be retrofitted. That would mean, like, no one has energy bills anymore. If it's the deep energy retrofits that we're talking about, merged with the renewable energy generation that we're talking about. So that we get stuck in these conversations around affordability, but the whole thing is supposed to be making our lives more affordable and resilient, and will definitely take an expensive upfront investment, but it will be entirely worth it to have a city where we're all well and healthy.
Councillor Blackburn, I think you wanted to respond.
Yeah, if I just could chime in. The other part too, the great unknown is just how much support financially we'll be getting from other orders of government. You know, what other programs does the federal government have coming down, and also the provincial government. The other thing too is what changes, and these are all things that we're going to be discussing starting on the 21st, is, you know, what changes do we need to see from the province to our own charter, that you know, so that we can help some of these projects along. For example, you know, things like grants to homeowners to retrofit or go to heat pumps or whatever. You know, at this stage of the game, under the charter, we're not allowed to give money to individuals or businesses, just nonprofits. So, you know, we're going to have to come to the province with a laundry list of changes that we're going to require in our legislation, so that we can stick handle our way through this and you know, make the most impactful change that we can. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Stoddart?
Thank you. I know a few of my residents who were watching some of the budget process emailed me, and already they're talking about how much of Halifax is going to increase my taxes. So it always, you know, I mean, not everyone, you know, I'm just talking maybe half a dozen, but that tendency to go towards how much is it going to cost me, you know, and what other things should be HRM's priorities. It's, you know, sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow, because, you know, the environment is number one. So, and it's hard to answer those type of questions as well, because you can't say, well, I think you're wrong. The environment is more important, but some people get stuck on that.
Yeah. Can I respond, Counselor, to that question or that point? Because honestly, I was astounded that one of the first things that the public heard about the Halifax climate plan is about this dang climate tax. I was like, that's terrible comms because it's not on the council. It's like most people don't even know that we have a climate plan, and then to hear about this climate tax increase to our property taxes it feels like it's sinking our ship before it hits the ocean, because we need to spend what it takes. And when you think, and in my mind, if this is done well, if there are people that cannot pay that like $60 to $150 more on their property taxes, and they're concerned about that, they should be the first people to benefit from this plan, right? Like if that affordability of $60 to $150 a year is a problem for them, like that's where our if we're doing this with the leave no one behind attitude, it's those people that should be getting those retrofits first, that should be getting. And in Nova Scotia, we actually, for homeowners that live with a low income, those are the people that they actually get a free retrofit and free heat pump through a provincial program. So part of the retrofit initiative for Nova Scotia and for Halifax is directing people to that program. And then, of course, we're always just going to have people on the opposite side of the political spectrum that are just emailing because they hate taxes in general. And it's like, I'm not sure they really understand the urgency of the crisis. Like, do they ask that when we put money into fossil fuel projects or highway expansions? Maybe they do. You know them better than I do, Councillor. But I think it's just important for us to think about that and the comparison. And also, and I challenged the mayor to this recently in the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, is we're just, you in your leadership position, the councillors and the mayor, you're going to be asked to make some really tough decisions right now. And there's just going to be some people that won't be happy, which I don't think you need me to tell you, but I feel the need to say that sometimes.
Yes, Joanne?
If I could just add real quickly there, I think that speaks to what Emma was talking about the importance of communications. I mean, it's on me that I didn't even know there was an actual document, but still, if I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of people in the HRM who don't know about it and who don't understand that it is a crisis. And I think that's where comms comes in, and and it shouldn't be on each individual counselor necessarily to talk to all of their constituents and go through it, bit by bit by bit. So just to back Emma up in the importance of that piece.
Lisa, did you want to add some more here?
Yeah, and I'm getting the message loud and clear about the communications piece, and I will make sure that I bring that forward on the 21st when we meet about Halifax, and see what communications plan they have, and suggest that perhaps it's time to tweak it, because what they've got in place is clearly not working. So I definitely appreciate this, and we'll take it to the committee of the whole meeting on the 21st to say, listen, how can we beef up our communications on this? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else want to chime in here? Questions or comments? So let me just, if I may, I actually had a question. It had to do with one of the slides, one of the markers. Is Krista, are you able to put the slides back up? It was about, or maybe you can just respond to it, Emma. It was about I think it was 2% of GDP spent on, yeah, it was I have to see the slide to come back to my question. I was thinking sort of, what is it now?
Well, okay. I do know that. I'm sorry, I forgot. I couldn't see my slides while I was talking to you, so
That's okay.
I forgot that normally when I give this presentation to municipal level, I give a bit of a disclaimer here. We primarily focus our advocacy on provincial and federal governments. Like Halifax has an incredible climate plan. Like, yeah, it's not being implemented right now, but like the province and the feds are definitely do not have emergency level climate plans. Like they're not ready to go. So that's where we focus our attention. And this 2% of GDP, according to would be 80 billion annually, federally, if I recall correctly. I would need to look at this, but you were looking for the actual numbers?
Well, my question was really, so it's saying we need to spend 2% of our GDP on climate mitigation actions and infrastructure. So I was just curious, what percentage are we spending now? Are we spending like 0.2%? Are we spending, so what is that?
Yeah, federally, we would need to spend about 80 billion, and we spend about 5 billion a year.
Oh, okay.
And we spent 5 billion a week last year on COVID. So that when we're in emergency mode, we will definitely spend what it takes. But we're not addressing it that way.
Yeah. So my comment too would be a couple of things. One is I just really appreciate your efforts to make us understand this is an emergency, because I mean, I'm thinking about Councillors Blackburn and Stoddart on council trying to think about spending and wanting to spend money, but getting pushback from citizens. We don't want our taxes raised. There's always pushback. And to the extent that we understand it's an emergency, there will be less pushback, right? People are not pushing back about repairing the Cabot Trail. The Cabot Trail got washed out, and it's going to get fixed. That's what happens when there's an emergency. People actually are willing to spend the money. So until we really understand that it is an emergency, I think there'll be more and more pushback. So I appreciate what you're doing on that. I also really appreciate that marker about nobody left behind, because for the last year, our committee has looked at issues facing women, and it doesn't seem to matter what we look at, women tend to be amongst the group of people that are left behind to some extent. We're the most often the poorest or the most disadvantaged, and especially women who are immigrants or women of color. So that idea, that notion that nobody should be left behind is really important. And the fact that when you're letting us know that climate change is going to impact women especially hard, that just gives us, I think, as a committee, a little bit more incentive to kind of push forward to our council to take some action on this to protect women in our community. So that was my little 2 cents worth, which I thank you for listening to, committee members, for indulging me. And so I think our time for our presentation is just about up, but if anybody else has anything they would like to say before we let Emma go. So I just want to reiterate, Emma, thank you very much. I do appreciate you making the time, and certainly agree with the committee members who already expressed their thanks to you and appreciation for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and to Councillor Stoddart and Councillor Blackburn. If you have any, if there's anything that the CEU can do to support you right now, also let us know. Like, we realize our leaders are being asked to do a lot. So thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Emma. All right. Moving on with our agenda, there are no staff reports to be presented today. I think reflective perhaps of the fact that we've had some time off over the Christmas season. So I think things are kind of moving along in the same direction as previously, but nothing specific. So that brings us to the approval of the work plan, which I circulated to you, and it was, I believe, with the agenda. And as you recall, what we've done with the work plan is just try to identify where we need to do some learning. A lot of our work is mandated by our administrative order. For example, the UN Safe Cities program and advising City Council on issues with respect to gender. But we try to identify those issues where we think we need to learn a little bit more. And you were very helpful with your suggestions at the last meeting, coming up with a number of ideas, and then we've sort of categorized them into those 3 priorities. And hopefully nothing was left out. I didn't get any emails from anybody telling me that anything was left out, but at this point you may have some comments or questions or additions. Christine, are you wanting to say something here? Oh, okay, I just thought your hand was up. What happens with this work plan? It is the sort of guiding document that we use as we develop our agenda for the upcoming meetings. And I will do my best to make sure our agendas reflect that. It's not the sum total. And if you recall, last year, we did not have climate change on as one of our priorities, but it came to the end of the year and we had time to address it, and we focused on that. So I don't think it precludes things coming up that we think might be important to be addressed, but it is a guiding document, which helps us focus our energy and attention, and I think we'll use it more efficiently. So anybody have any questions or comments about the work plan, or are you ready to make a motion that we forward it to the Executive Standing Committee?
I so move.
Councillor Stoddard would move that we approve the annual work plan for 2022 and recommend the Executive Standing Committee review and approve it. Is there a seconder for that?
I second it.
Thank you, Christine. So Christine, second that. Any discussion of that motion? Well, thank you. That's good. So ready for the question? All those in favor indicate by waving or saying aye.
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 Okay, opposed, none, and that motion is carried. Okay, so that brings us to item 10.2.2, which is at this point just asking if there are actions that you would like us to take as a committee. I guess the thing I'm cognizant of is when we had our discussion in December, people said over and over and over again that we would like to be a committee that kind of moves issues ahead, that we don't just listen to them, but we come up with some actions. And I think we've done a very good job of that in the past. So now my question that I'm putting to you is there some action that it seems appropriate for us to take at this point, having heard the presentation today and Noreen's presentation back in November, I guess it was. Is anybody ready to raise anything? Lily.
I definitely agree with your suggestion earlier, Madam Chair, that it would be great to get Shannon and to come and talk to us about Halifax. And I definitely think, I know this is something that we had briefly chatted about before too, that it would be great if we were able to express our support and advocate that Halifax be fully implemented. I'm sure that there's, I'm not entirely sure, in terms of how we as a committee can recommend that, but I think that especially given that it's a topic of discussion right now and the council will be discussing it soon, and then the budget's coming up in March, that it's a really relevant time to express our support for it. And I mean, I think too, something to consider is that when we have that third priority of our work plan for this upcoming year of reviewing existing municipal policies, is that we could, include, looking over the climate work and considering, whether there are areas where the impacts on women could be considered to a greater extent, and ensuring, all our discussions on housing and the health and well-being of women, those are incredibly relevant to how climate change will impact women. So I think we could bring a lot of the knowledge that we've gained from these other issues that we've explored to our reflection on the Health Act as well. So I think it definitely would be great to hear from Shannon if possible.
Okay.
Express support.
So if I could just summarize, I think you've come up with sort of three things that you're suggesting. One is to hear from Shannon to actually have a presentation on Halifax 2050 plan. The other is to try to do what we can as what's appropriate. We get some advice from from Krista and the Deputy Clerk's office about what's appropriate for us to do in terms of making council aware that we support the funding. And the third thing is for us to be thinking about the impact of municipal policies with regard to climate on women. Is that right? So there's three things. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Just let me go to the others in case there are other comments before
I do have a comment, Jen. So my point is kind of both about climate change and also about next one, International Women's Day. I want to say climate change is a big topic. And so for this year, 2022, the International Women's Day's topic actually is called Gender Equality Today for Sustainable Tomorrow. So it's kind of related to climate change. I find it's very related to our meeting today. And from Emma's presentation earlier, she mentioned about the importance of awareness and the education about climate change to women. So I think we can discuss more in the next point, but I think it's very actionable is, for example, this year when we plan our International Women's Day, this climate change could be one of our focus priority, and then invite women who are the advocate on climate change, or to bring on education wellness piece about climate change, and also talk about women from this angle. So that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. So integrating the climate change issue into the International Women's Day, using it as an educational opportunity and so on. Thank you. Any others? Well, Lily, let me just come back to you, because I just would remind you that when we've had an opportunity to think about motions, one of the persons who suggested it gets to work on it. So I'm asking now, would you be willing to help work on a motion that might be appropriate? But we don't have one now. I don't think now's, but over the next month to come up with a motion. Would you be
for sure.
Do you have some time to do that? Okay, good. Anything else? Anybody disagree or support what Lily or Christine said? Are we in agreement with Councillor Blackburn?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to perhaps get the presentation from Shannon Miedema, and then the conversation that follows from that. I think we'll be able to, we'll be in a better position to form a motion that we can take to executive and to ultimately council.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Sure. All right. So I think we're good with that. Then we have some concrete steps, and that takes us to the discussion of the International Women's Day, and Caroline is here. So I will turn over the floor to Caroline. Thank you, Caroline, for being here, and again for your work on the International Women's Day. And I'll just let you go around the table. Or do you want me to call on people for you?
No, that's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll give a little brief introduction or recap of that memo that was circulated back at the beginning of December. I'm just pulling it up on my screen so I have have my notes here. Just give me one moment. So thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for mentioning some suggestions with regards to topics that are of interest to you for International Women's Day. I've taken a few notes already. So back in December, I circulated a memo for the group's consideration. As we did last year, we wanted to come to the committee to get your feedback and input as part of one of your duties on what staff does, our work with regards to gender inclusion, to, get your thoughts and insight about how we can, offer an inclusive International Women's Day event. So we want to focus our work on centering the voices of Mi'kmaq women, of African Nova Scotian women, of racialized people, and the 2S LGBTQ+ in this community in this work, as well as Acadians and immigrant women as well. So that's kind of at the heart, the center of the International Women's Day event. And we talked a lot about that last year as well. So we're looking for some input around what are some of the most important emerging issues that are happening in your community, or just from your lived experience, and ways that we can engage with the communities that you live in or that you work with, to promote the event or get people excited and wanting to participate. And also, how would you like to be involved in the event? And I should say, I guess as a footnote to those questions, is that due to COVID, we are going to be offering the event virtually. It's going to be live streamed. We had been hoping to do it in person this year because last year we weren't able to do it in person, but it is going to be virtual again, just to keep everybody safe. So with that in mind, participation in a virtual event might look a little bit different than it would if we were sharing food or sharing space at a downtown location somewhere, or in communities and whatnot. So just getting your thoughts on what's happening in your community, what's happening for you, what's on your radar. And I should mention that right now the planning group is comprised of not just HRM staff. We've expanded this to be collaborative with our community partners like the Nova Scotia Status of Women, the YWCA, Transition House Association of Nova Scotia, and several other partner organizations. So we're trying to bring in as many diverse perspectives to the planning process. People have been talking about the importance of honoring the fact that this has been a hard 2 years for women, for people who identify as non-binary and gender diverse, right? So it's been, there's definitely some hard stuff that we need to grapple with, particularly in the area of gender inequality, but that we also wanted to take the opportunity to celebrate the fact that we're resilient and we're still here, and to look towards the future, right? So what are our next steps with regards to gender equality and building a more gender inclusive future? So kind of a mix of, recognizing where we're at, but also saying, listen, we want to celebrate and enjoy this time together, because we have sometimes a few opportunities to do that, especially during a pandemic. So Jane, if you'd like to go around the circle, that would be wonderful. I can answer if anyone has them.
Sure. So comments, questions, or suggestions for Caroline? Start with you, Lily. Anything that you want to?
Sure. I appreciate, Christine, that in the previous discussion you had mentioned trying to integrate some areas of climate and sustainability to International Women's Day. And I think that definitely, given that there's a bit of a theme or talk around acknowledging that COVID has been really hard and challenging, that there could definitely be some ties in to bring in the conversation around climate as well to that. So I definitely think that is a great idea and would be a great focus. And I think climate and COVID and housing are definitely the biggest issues that have been coming up for people, my communities. And I think it would definitely, one thing in terms of reaching people that came to mind for me is having multiple different mediums. I mean, obviously there's probably just going to be one event or live streamed event, but using all the social media platforms to engage people in different ways, and having some short posts or short clips or things like that to share too, I think would be helpful. And yeah, I definitely think right now, especially now that things have transitioned back primarily online for most people, that attention spans are pretty short right now. So I think like finding a way to have many different methods for people to engage is really crucial, because especially young people who are students and are in class online all the time, it's very challenging to additionally go to more online events. But obviously you also want to be able to engage those people. So yeah, those are some thoughts I had.
Thank you, Lily. Joanne.
I sort of, when I was thinking about this in terms of themes, the thing that jumped out at me, which in fact seems to be what both of you are talking about, was women in community. So women really working across community, working across all the barriers that are, generally put up in front of us. So, and given what you said about other partners working with HRM staff too, I mean, and that could work with something like that Lily is saying, that maybe the Y does a quick presentation, maybe, the ISANS does something. I don't know, but I think it's important for the women to work in community. So I like what I'm hearing about what you've been thinking about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Councillor Blackburn, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, so when you say this is totally going to be online, is there any live component at all? I'm just thinking, like, are you envisioning, excuse me, that the host of the event would be, say, center stage at O'Regan Hall at the library, and broadcasting, out to individuals who are joining online? I'm just wondering if that's something that's under consideration. This sort of gives us the opportunity to have perhaps a musical component with a couple of musicians sort of in that vast area, still getting some a live feel, but at the same time still maintaining a safe event. So just wondering if that's something that's been under consideration at all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Absolutely, yes, that is the plan, is that we are going to, if safe and if people are comfortable, those presenters, speakers, and performers that would like to come will be able to come to Paul O'Regan Hall at Halifax Central Library to do the live streaming. With social distancing and masking and all of that important stuff in place, similar to the way that we did it last year. So those involved program elements would be at the library, and then people could, join and participate virtually. And if speakers don't have comfort level yet, that's okay too. They could join in, they could speak virtually too. So we do have that ability. And I think that we've learned from last year with regards to live streaming that for the things that we lose by being in person, we also gain a lot of accessibility on a virtual platform with CART and ASL and things like that. So although it is a little bit sad not to be in person, I think we do still reach quite a few folks. We're imagining that it will be in the morning. And of course, it'll be a free event because, we want to reduce barriers to participation, right? So many of the International Women's Day events, unfortunately, are hosted with a fee associated, right, by businesses and things like that, and often by charities to raise money, which is good too. But we know that our key initiatives through DNI is around inclusive public service. So we want to make sure anyone who wants to participate can. It would be recorded and available on YouTube and whatnot.
No, that's good to hear, because I think that the live component certainly sort of sets it apart from just another Zoom meeting, right? Where, we're all just there in these little boxes, but, at least we can watch something that's taking place live and feel more a part and more connected to it. So, no, that is good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tanya.
So I think we're all kind of along the same idea for theme wise. I don't know if has the exact theme been decided yet?
Yeah, so we voted and we came to a decision that it would be disrupt and celebrate the future of gender equality for women, girls, and gender diverse people in HRM. We decided we wanted to create our own theme. Although there are many IWD themes, we wanted it to be really relevant to our local context and really center those perspectives that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. So right now, it's just the kind of the key components are disrupt and celebrate and looking towards the future.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about, and I don't know how it would look visually if it's incorporating artists from around the city. But I've really enjoyed the projection displays that they've done on the library, the old library. And I think it would be fantastic to see women-centered art from either Indigenous or LGBTQ communities, or however those overlap, to be brought up and kind of featured there and be shared with the city. I think it's a really great way to kind of get people out, but safely. And also obviously the ones on the city hall as well. Or in some way, if it can be done on around the central library, in the main windows there as well. And in regards to a performer, I went to high school with Renee Smith, and she has always had a really big voice around her community in North Preston, and I've really enjoyed seeing her perform around the province. So if you were looking for an idea of someone to reach out to, or in hopes that they would reach out to you, I know she's fantastic. So.
Thanks, Tanya. I really appreciate that. Can you spell Renee's name for me?
Yeah, it's Reeny Smith. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tanya. I've heard Renee too. I think that's an awesome suggestion. Councillor Stoddart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We were talking earlier about COVID and women. Before we're talking about, the challenges women have, especially a single mother with school being in, then school being out, and school being in, and all the challenges, finding a babysitter, not, and also the other things that happen in connection with COVID and women is, abuse, because everybody's isolated and, things are more under the carpet because you're not able to get out and tell somebody. And if you are able to get out, it's very limited. So I'm thinking, there might be a lot of abused women that are silent because of COVID. And of course, that leads to, and could be a result of COVID, the depression and anxiety that women feel being, excluded maybe from family and friends. So I just wondered, where we were talking before about COVID and women, if that's something we could interject into Women's Day, or is that something totally separate? Not sure.
I think thank you so much for that suggestion, Councillor. I think absolutely. I think that's so many people's lived experience, as we speak. I mean, I'm surprised that my children haven't interrupted this call with, requests for snacks and tantrums and crying. And I think the demands of working from home, caring, and juggling multiple lockdowns and social isolation are very real, and they impact us all differently. But I think definitely is on the table for conversation as part of the event. I will bring that feedback to the planning group and see how that might be incorporated into some of the program elements. I think it's important conversation to have. And, you know, I remember one of the planning group members saying, like, we have to be honest, right? Like we tell the truth about what's going on for women right now, but also create that space to have some joy and have some fun too. Because, you know, the day-to-day of social isolation is certainly not pretty.
The other thing I was thinking about is working. A lot of women may have vendor positions, maybe in hairdressing, they might be working in a restaurant, and then this off and on, you know, having to look for another job, and then the place is open again. So, you know, they want to quit the job that they've recently gotten. And so that might be another area where COVID affects women, especially if they're the only breadwinner. So, just thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Christine, do you want to add comments?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I'm thinking about like 3 topics. The first one is about a sustainable tomorrow. Earlier I mentioned kind of related to climate change. And second one is International Women's Day's topic, very similar like the topic, Caroline, you just mentioned, like a break the bias. So I'm thinking about, for example, last March, I talked about anti-Asian racism, and some victims, they are women. So it's not only for Asian, like this kind of a racism mixed with like a gender inequality, this kind of intersectionality. I feel it will be an interesting topic too. And number 3, I think it would be good to have something uplifting celebration. So it's great to hear you mention the why and the status of women will be some sort of partnership. I'm thinking definitely will be kind of hard to do a camping school like in such a short time, but I think it will be good opportunity to invite some female leaders in, for example, in politics and in health and public-private sector, and to share the success and the leadership story, because I think these are women, they are inspiring other women, and that we all face challenge. When we hear about other people's story, it kind of motivates us and will invite more women to consider to kind of take the leadership role in the future. So be a decision maker. So that's my 3 suggestions.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So can I just follow up on what Christine's 3rd point, because and also your point, Caroline, about celebration. I would be delighted if we had something that was really celebratory about women in the HRM and what they've done or are doing. And I just think about, and what I envision, I don't know if we have any money for this, or you have any money for this. It's just my experience in business, and this is how we did it in business. We would have big slideshows with music and, you know, all this kind of photographs and subtitles about what people had accomplished. And it would be so wonderful to have, say, a 15 or 10-minute slideshow of, you know, people like Councillor Blackburn, you know, and how she's, you know, hung in there, you know, in council, being a woman from the beginning by herself, or Emma, who's working so hard on climate change, or this young woman I saw interviewed on TV the other day, from Out of the Cold, I think she's the executive director of Out of the Cold. So there are women like that in our community who are doing remarkable things. And as Christine says, it's inspiring to us and if we could, you know, it takes a lot of work, but people have different involvements, some, you know, grassroots level, a political level, and I'm thinking again of Mia and her and the work they did on that research project, Home for Good, who helped us understand the impact of affordable lack of housing on women. So anyways, that's my thought, and the way I would present it would be with photographs and music and subtitles, and just celebrating the contributions of women and make that a piece of it.
Thank you so much.
Does that give you enough to go on?
Can I just add one
Trying to
thing?
unmute myself, but yes, I mean, this
Sure.
is all wonderful input. Thank you.
Joanne wants to add something.
I just wanted to add that when you said disrupt and celebrate, it made me think of, like in the old days, we used to do street theater. So you got your politics across while still having a lot of fun with what you were doing. So I don't know if you have any theater people that you can, connect with to do some little skits or something.
I love that idea. Thank you. I'll definitely share that back with the group. It brings a smile to my face. I can just imagine some good laughs. Thanks, Joanne.
All right. Anything else for Caroline? And of course, I'm sure she's always welcomes any of your thoughts via email or phone call or whatever. So if you have other thoughts. So that brings us to an update on council's activities. I'm not sure whether Councillor Stoddard or Councillor Blackburn is going to help us out here. Councillor Stoddard, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Get my papers here. Okay, we had a December 14th regional council. And so I just picked out a few things that I thought might be of interest. There was a request to include 1262 Bedford Highway in the Registry of Heritage Properties, and council approved that. There was an updating of the planning documents to happen in Bedford West area on Kearney Lake Road, and there will be a public hearing was held. Sorry. There was a second reading of bylaw H204, amending the bylaw H200 respecting the establishment of Heritage Advisory Committee and a civic registry for the heritage properties. Also, Regional Council approved the changes to the bylaw to offer discounted bulk transit fares. So it'd be community groups or school groups or something like that. So they get a discounted fare because they're taking a larger number of children with them. There was an increase to the request for quotation on snow and ice control, and multiple sites won that competition for a 5-year total of $221,610. There will be another municipal polling district boundary review, and these changes will be in effect for 2024 municipal election. Let me see. There's a master planning initiative for the West End Mall. And there was an award for a quotation for 2 new custom 500G rescue pumpers. Okay, let's see, is there anything else? On December 14th. Councillor nominations for the Halifax Regional Library Board and Indigenous Community Liaison, Councillor Morris was appointed to the Halifax Regional Library Board, and Councillor Mason was appointed as the Indigenous Community Liaison. And I'm going to move on and give you some information on a recent council meeting, which was January 11th. There were proclamations. So I got a booster shot. That's what I'm going to blame all this stuttering on, right? I'm a little off, but anyway. The day of Black Loyalist Exodus, when 15 ships left to go to Sierra Leone. The January 15th, 2020 was declared as an International Day of Black Loyalist Exodus, and the departure of 1,196 self-liberated Black Loyalists from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone. It was also the year of the Garden and National Garden Day. Heritage hearing to include 5663 Cornwallis Street was approved. There's a petition presented by Councillor Cleary to repave Alderwood Drive and Birch Cove Drive, and put that in the fiscal budget for next year. Let me see. Additional costs for accommodating funding. This is a housing initiatives. It was approved that we spend $1,200,000 as part of purchase and installation of modular units for the 2 sites for the homeless. And let's see, finally, snow and ice control. They broke it down to 4 different areas. One is Windsor Street and roads, winter sidewalks, walkways, trails, snow covered control, snow and ice control. That would be for Sackville, Beaver Bank, Fall River, Windsor Junction and surrounding areas. And then they broke down winter streets and roads and sidewalks for the walkways and trails in Bedford and Hemmes Plains area. And also they broke it down for the same thing for Halifax Peninsula North, and then broken down again for Halifax, Clayton Park, Fairview area. So they're trying to identify the areas which the contractors will give their attention to. And that's probably it in a nutshell for the 2 meetings that we've had, one before the new year and the first one after.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Stoddart about council activity?
And these meetings are on the website, Halifax website. So if you ever want to go back and listen or clarify anything, you can. They're always open for you to have a look, listen, stop, repeat, return. So,
can I ask you a question? This is just a curious question, because I know as councillors, you folks have been talking about and making decisions about funding for affordable housing or for shelters, basically, for quite a long time. And, you know, as a citizen who reads about this in the newspaper, my question is, do you have any idea why it's taking so long? Like it's a very long process, like, to get this happening, right? And like I can't remember, but I think, Lisa, you talked about this, you know, months ago, that you had, as a council, had made decisions about budget. So do you have a sense?
So it's been, it's been 4 months that since we put the initial money towards this, and to the opening of the actual modular unit. I mean, part of it was we had to look for a specific location. There were some very, very specific criteria that had to be met. It had to be on municipal land. It had to be close to services and amenities, you know, that sort of thing. We had to find one on the Dartmouth side and one on the Halifax side. One of the areas that was eventually chosen, they had to do some work on the ground, because once they got in there and started to do the work and to, you know, run electrical and to run water and sewer, that sort of thing, the ground wasn't stable enough, so they had to stabilize it. So that took some time as well. And then there were delays in getting the actual modulars themselves from the supplier, just supply chain issue with that. But the Dartmouth location is now, I mean, the agreement that we had with the province was we would do the physical structures, get them in place, and then we would hand the keys over to Out of the Cold shelter, and they would run it for the province. So they're now doing that or getting that in place. So we haven't had an update in the last few days, but that was the last that we heard, that the keys had been turned over to the Dartmouth location, and the province and Out of the Cold were now staffing it, and they're the ones that are actually going to, you know, go out and find the residents for it. In the meantime, the Halifax modular site is they're still hooking up water and electrical to that. there were delays in getting that as well, just because of Halifax, or just because of Nova Scotia Power having, issues with just getting the personnel that they needed to do that. It's in the parking lot of the Centennial Pool. So they're hoping that will be, I think, another month, and then we'll be able to hand the keys over to Out of the Cold for that. But during this entire time, we have been putting people up in hotels. We have the Gray Arena that is open and will be open. It will stay open until both sets of modular units are fully operational. So and of course, whenever we have weather that comes in as well, like this weekend, we stand up extra space and fund for hotel space, and we put out some extra effort to make sure we get as many people as possible into a safe place whenever a storm approaches. So just a sort of a brief overview of where we're at and where we're going.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that information. And I just want to, from my point of view, I appreciate your efforts as council members on making sure people have shelter when they need shelter. So thank you for that. Yeah. So thank you, Councillor Stoddart. I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. There's no added items. The date of the next meeting is set as February 3rd. All I need at this point is, unless there's any pressing issues that somebody wants to speak about.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. So the meeting is adjourned. And thanks again to all of you.